Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at the events of a day, the historical context in which the events took place, the historical ramifications, some people that were born, and some people that died on that day. As always, if you have not yet, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content, and tell a friend. And without any further ado, this day in history, March 18th. And on this day, in 1766, the British Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. After 4 months of widespread protest in America, the British Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. It was a taxation measure enacted to help raise revenues for standing the British Army in America. The act forced colonists to buy a British stamp for every official document they obtained. The stamp itself displayed an image of a Tudor rose framed by the word America, and a phrase in French that said, "Shame to him who thinks evil of it." The colonists had convened a Stamp Act Congress in the previous October to vocalize their opposition to this legislation, and greeted the arrival of the stamps with outrage and violence. Benjamin Franklin appeared before the British House of Commons before they voted to repeal it, and implored them to repeal it. However, the same day, the House of Commons and the Parliament passed the Declaration Acts, asserting that the British government had free and total legislative power over the colonists. So this is somewhat of a Pyrrhic victory for the colonists and the British House of Commons, because this is going to come up again quite soon, I might add. So stay tuned. Like I said, this, you could look at this as a victory for either side. The colonists got what they wanted. The British House of Commons and Parliament says, "No, okay, we're gonna placate you here, but remember, we're still the main boss." And in my opinion, the genie's out of the bottle here, and the ball rolling toward the American Revolution has begun. Births that occurred on this day. In 1837, in Caldwell, New Jersey, Grover Cleveland was born. He was the 22nd and 24th President of the United States. He is the only president elected so far to 2 non-consecutive terms, and probably honestly will be the only one. He is known for his honesty. When he first ran for president in the 1884 election, his opponents portrayed him in an unflattering light. They said that Grover Cleveland had fathered a child out of wedlock and was therefore an immoral man. Grover Cleveland admitted it, and also admitted that he had been supporting the child ever since he had fathered this child. People admired his honesty. They said, "Grover the good, Grover the honest." And he was running against James G. Blaine, and his campaign had James G. Blaine, Continental Liar from Maine. So, he was, when he was first elected to the White House, he was a bachelor. and he got married while in the White House. And the Baby Ruth candy bar is actually named for one of his children, Baby Ruth. Um, he was known for his commitment to physical conservatism and classical liberalism. Um, he was also an opponent of patronage and political corruption, and he won the popular vote when he ran for re-election in 1888. But as we all know, in the United States of America, winning the popular vote in a presidential election is just a vanity contest. You've got to hit the Electoral College majority, and he did not do that. It is noted that when he left the White House in 1889, the First Lady told the staff, "Take good care of the place because we're going to be back in 4 years," and they were. He staged a political comeback in the 1892 election and won back the White House. Unfortunately for him, when he won back the White House, shortly after that, the Panic of 1893 hit. And plunged the country into a great economic downturn, one of the greatest in the country's history. Historians rank him generally in the upper tier of presidents, and I tend to agree with this. I would even go as far as to put him probably in the top 10, because there's some presidents who most historians and political scientists put in the top 10 of presidents that I disagree belong there. I think one of them is there because of pure nostalgia, and because this is a president generally from their childhood or early college years that they have a fond nostalgia for, and I don't believe are looking at in a proper context of what he actually didn't accomplish while he was in the White House. And I'm just going to leave that open to interpretation of who it is. I think most of you can figure out who I'm talking about. Not saying that president was a bad president. He's generally probably a very good president. I just don't think we should elevate him to the top 10 when you have a president like Grover Cleveland, who definitely should be included in that higher tier. Deaths that occurred on this day. A man by the name of John Chapman died in 1845 at the age of 70 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You probably know him better, though, by the name most people know him by, Johnny Appleseed. He was a pioneer and a nurseryman who introduced apple trees to large parts of Pennsylvania, Ontario, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and the northern counties of present-day West Virginia. In addition to being a nurseryman, he was a missionary, and was admired by Native Americans. Even hostile tribes did not try to endanger his life. He converted many Native Americans to the gospel of his religion. He was a Christian missionary. And he admired Native Americans as well. The Native Americans believed that he was touched by the Great Spirit, and that they should not harm him, or harm should not come to him. He was also very conscious of not mistreating animals. He sometimes, if he was going to build a fire and saw small insect life on the log, would not burn it, for fearing for killing a creature that in his eyes had been created by his creator and thus was wanting of living. He believed that only his creator could determine when a life ended and began, because that is who said that that was worthy of a life, and that only that entity should be able to end it. He was also a vegetarian. He did not eat meat. He extended this the full realm. Uh, and he never married. He believed he would find his soulmate in the great afterlife, which he would call heaven. So that is kind of an interesting thing about Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed is most of how people come to know of him is when they're in elementary school, generally. He is one of those first people you learn about in the early grades, in kindergarten and first grade, of an early introduction to history. At least in my experience when I was in school. And I always envisioned Johnny Appleseed as just this really interesting character from American history, and the more I've read about him, the more interesting he is still to me. It's an amazing story that someone like this actually was a real person and not a myth. And the conception of him just throwing apple seeds is a myth, though. He actually planted trees in a responsible way and put little fences around them to protect them, and would come back and check on them. So he was a very astute nurseryman. And that's all for the video, and now about those 2 videos I'm going to produce for you. Later tonight, with a special guest, I am going to do a party trick that I have known. I am going to go from the 2016 election all the way back to the 1920 election, because that was 100 years ago. I don't know who the losing vice presidential candidate is going to be yet. But I'm going to tell you every losing vice presidential candidate, major party one, and something about that election. And then I'm going to have someone check me. You're going to have to take my word for it and their word for it that I'm being honest, and I have no notes. So that's that. And then possibly tonight, possibly early tomorrow, I'm going to do a update on the state of the Democratic race for president. So I will see you all then. Have a great night.